The wedding hall was filled with light and music. Golden lamps hung from the ceiling, and soft flowers decorated every table. Guests laughed loudly, their voices mixing with the sound of clinking glasses and happy music. It was supposed to be a perfect evening. Everyone was dressed in their best clothes, wearing smiles as wide as the shining chandeliers above. The bride walked into the hall, her white dress glowing under the lights. She looked like the happiest person in the world, yet deep in her eyes there was something small, something no one noticed. She held her son's hand tightly. He was only 7 years old, dressed in a small black suit with a bow tie. He looked handsome, but he did not smile. Unlike everyone else, the boy was silent, his little eyes moving around the room as if searching for something hidden. The guests clapped and cheered as the bride greeted her family and friends. Music played louder, and the dance floor filled with colorful dresses and sharp suits. Plates of food came and went, glasses were raised, and laughter spread like fire across the hall. To anyone watching, it was a perfect wedding, full of joy, beauty, and love. But to the boy, something was wrong. He didn't laugh, he didn't clap. Instead, he kept staring. His small hand squeezed his mother's hand every now and then, as if asking her to stay alert. His mother smiled at the guests and nodded politely, but her son's silence started to bother her. She leaned down and whispered softly, "What's wrong, sweetheart? Why aren't you smiling?" The boy only shook his head. His lips pressed together tightly, and his eyes darted across the room again. He was watching. Watching everyone. Watching too closely for a child his age. The bride's sister, the groom, and the relatives were busy enjoying the night. No one noticed the boy's nervousness. No one saw his serious face, or how his hand tray bled when he held his mother's. To them, it was only a happy little child at his mother's side. But inside the boy's small chest, his heart was beating faster and faster. He felt something the others did not. The mother tried to distract him. She bent down again and whispered, "Look at the lights, aren't they beautiful? Look at your aunt, doesn't she look so pretty tonight?" But the boy did not answer. His eyes were locked on one corner of the room. There, a group of guests were talking and laughing. To everyone else, they looked normal. To him, something felt wrong. He stared at their faces, their smiles, their eyes. He couldn't explain it, but he knew. He knew deep inside that they didn't belong. He leaned closer to his mother, his voice so low that she almost couldn't hear it. "Mom," his tone carried fear. His small fingers dug into her hand. The mother looked at him with concern. "What is it?" she asked gently. The boy whispered again, this time with urgency. His lips barely moved, but his words were clear. "Mom, we need to leave." The mother blinked, confused. For a moment, she thought he was joking. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no joke. She saw fear. Real fear. And it made her heart skip a beat. The wedding hall was still filled with laughter and music. The guests danced, the food was served, the night looked perfect. But for the boy and his mother, something dark had just begun. The music played louder, and the wedding hall looked even brighter than before. People were busy dancing, eating, and laughing, but the boy sat very still beside his mother. His small hand held her wrist tightly, and his serious eyes never left the crowd. The mother leaned down again, trying to calm him. She smiled as she whispered, "What is it, sweetheart? Are you shy? Do you want to go outside for some fresh air?" But the boy did not smile. He leaned close to her ear. His voice was so soft it was almost swallowed by the music, yet it carried a sharp weight. "Mom," he whispered, "we have to leave. We cannot stay here." The mother froze for a moment. She pulled back slightly and looked into his face. His lips trembled as he spoke, but his eyes, they were steady, filled with a fear too old for a 7-year-old child. "What are you talking about?" she asked, forcing a small laugh. "It's your aunt's wedding. Everyone is happy. Why would we leave?" The boy's grip on her hand grew stronger. He leaned in again, his small voice urgent and pressing. Because they are not who you think they are, he said, her heart skipped. She looked around the room, seeing only guests who were clapping, dancing, and smiling. She wanted to believe he was imagining things. Maybe it was a child's game, maybe he was just nervous. But when she looked back into his eyes, her own smile began to fade. What do you mean? She whispered. The boy glanced toward the far side of the hall. Some of them, he said, his voice trembling, they are not people. The mother's chest tightened. She wanted to laugh it away, but her son's face looked deadly serious. He wasn't playing a game. He wasn't pretending. He was warning her. She tried to distract him again. You're just tired, she said softly, stroking his hair. Maybe you should rest for a while. But the boy shook his head quickly. No, Mom. You don't understand. We need to go. Right now. Before they notice. His words sank into her like ice. For the first time, she felt a shiver run through her body. The music, the laughter, the clinking glasses, everything suddenly sounded distant, like a thin cover hiding something darker. Her eyes scanned the crowd again. The guests looked normal enough. Some were dancing, some were talking, some were drinking. But with her son's words in her mind, every smile felt a little too wide, every laugh a little too sharp, every glance a little too long. She leaned closer to her son, her voice barely a whisper. How do you know this? The boy lowered his head, as if afraid someone was listening. He whispered again, each word breaking the mother's calm heart. I saw them before. I recorded them. The mother's eyes widened. Her breath caught in her throat. Recorded them? What could that mean? Before she could ask, the boy slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He held it tightly, his small fingers shaking. He looked at her with pleading eyes. Please, Mom, he whispered. Believe me. We have to leave. The mother stared at him, torn between disbelief and rising fear. She wanted to protect him, but now she also wanted to know what he had seen. The wedding hall still looked perfect, still echoed with joy. But the mother felt it in her bones. The night was no longer safe. And soon, she would see the truth with her own eyes. The boy's small hands trembled as he held the phone. The mother looked down at it, her heart racing. The bright screen glowed in the dim corner of the wedding hall, almost too bright, almost too sharp against the happy blur of lights and laughter around them. What is this? She whispered, her voice barely strong enough to form words. The boy's eyes darted nervously from side to side before he leaned closer. Watch, he said, his voice soft but urgent. The mother pressed her lips together, unsure if she wanted to see. But her son's frightened face left her no choice. She lowered her eyes to the screen. At first, it looked normal. The phone showed a short video clip of the wedding guests. People were sitting at tables, some were standing near the buffet, others were laughing and clapping. For a moment, she almost felt relief, but then, something shifted. She saw one man at the table raise his glass. His smile was wide, too wide, stretching unnaturally across his face. The corners of his lips almost touched his ears. Her stomach tightened. She blinked quickly, thinking it must be a trick of the light. The video continued. Another guest leaned back in his chair, but his reflection in the mirror behind him didn't follow. The reflection stayed still, frozen, even while the man's body moved. The mother gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. Her chest tightened with fear. Keep watching, the boy whispered. She did. And the longer she watched, the worse it became. A woman on the dance floor twirled happily, but when her face turned toward the camera, her eyes glowed faintly, like the pale shine of the moon. The glow flickered, as if hidden behind a thin mask of human skin. Another guest passed close to the camera. For a split second, his face rippled, as though something beneath the skin was trying to break free. Then it snapped back to normal. The mother's hands grew cold. She wanted to throw the phone away, but she couldn't stop staring. Each second revealed something more terrifying, something that her mind tried to deny. These were not normal people. Her son's voice cut through her fear. Do you see it now, Mom? Do you understand? She looked at him, her lips pale, her voice shaking. What are they? The boy shook his head slowly. I don't know. But they are not like us. They are pretending. The mother felt her knees weaken. Her breathing grew heavy, and her heart pounded in her ears. She wanted to scream, but the laughter and music in the hall drowned out every thought. Around them, people still clapped, danced, and cheered. Nobody else noticed. Nobody else saw. She clutched the phone tightly, as if holding proof of a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Her eyes lifted from the screen and scanned the hall. Now, with the boy's video burned into her mind, she saw it too. That wide smile. Those glowing eyes. That wrong reflection. Everywhere she looked, the guests no longer seemed human. Her son touched her hand again, his voice soft but desperate. We need to go before they notice us. The mother's throat tightened. She nodded faintly, but her legs refused to move. The hall felt like a cage, and the walls seemed to close in. She had never been so afraid in her life. The wedding that once felt perfect was no longer a celebration. It was a trap filled with strangers wearing human faces, and now she finally believed her son. The phone screen went dark, but the mother's fear only grew brighter inside her chest. She could still see those unnatural smiles, those glowing eyes, and that frozen reflection. Even with the video gone, the images stayed in her mind like shadows that would not leave. She looked around the wedding hall again, but this time her eyes were sharper. She did not see a happy celebration anymore. She saw details that chilled her blood. One guest clapped his hands too hard, the sound echoing louder than it should. Another woman's laugh rose above the music, high and sharp, like glass breaking. And then, near the buffet, she noticed something even worse, a man lifting food to his mouth but not chewing. He just held it there, smiling, as if pretending to eat. Her throat went dry. She pulled her son closer and whispered, "Stay near me. Don't let go of my hand." The boy nodded, his small fingers squeezing hers tightly. He did not look surprised. He had seen these things before, but for the mother, every second felt like a new nightmare. She tried to breathe slowly, to calm herself, but her heart was racing too fast. The laughter and music of the hall felt distant now, like a mask hiding something rotten. Every face she looked at seemed to twitch in ways it shouldn't. Every movement seemed just a little wrong. She told herself, "Don't panic. Don't show fear. They must not notice you," but how could she not? She was a mother trying to protect her child in a room filled with something that wore human faces but was not human at all. Her eyes darted toward her sister, the bride. She stood at the center of the hall, surrounded by smiling guests. She looked so happy, so unaware of the danger. The mother's chest ached. Should she warn her sister? Should she scream and tell everyone to run? But what if no one believed her? What if the guests reacted first? The thought of it awed her shiver. The boy tugged at her arm gently. "Mom," he whispered, "don't look at them too much. If you look too long, they might know you see them." The words made her skin crawl. She forced her eyes down to the floor for a moment, pretending to fix her son's bow tie. But the heavy feeling of being watched did not go away. She felt eyes on her, sharp and burning. Even when she was not looking, her breath grew short. Her palms were wet with sweat. For the first time in her life, she felt truly powerless. The hall was filled with light and joy for everyone else, but to her it was darker than any nightmare. She wanted to run, to grab her son and escape, but every step seemed dangerous. One wrong move, and the creatures might notice. She leaned down to her son again, her whisper trembling. "We'll leave soon. Stay calm, don't be afraid." But deep inside, she wasn't sure if she was telling him the truth or lying to herself, because in that moment, the mother realized something that chilled her soul. She was trapped, and she did not know how much longer she could hide her fear. The mother's breath was heavy, her hands cold as ice. She tried to look calm, tried to smile at the guests as if nothing was wrong, but inside her heart was shaking. She leaned close to her son again, her voice trembling. "What do you mean, they are not people?" she whispered. The boy swallowed, his face pale. His small eyes darted toward the corner of the hall where a group of guests stood together, laughing in low voices. Then he turned back to her, speaking so softly she could barely hear. "I watched them before the wedding started," he said. "When no one was looking, they changed. Their faces moved, like masks sliding on and off. I saw their real faces for just a second, and I recorded it." The mother's heart pounded. She wanted to deny it, to call it imagination, but the video on his phone had already shown her enough. She believed him now. "What are they?" she asked, her throat dry. The boy shook his head quickly. "I don't know. But they're not human. They pretend. They copy. But they don't get everything right. That's why they look strange in the video. That's why their reflections don't match. They are trying to act like people, but they can't hide forever." The mother felt her stomach twist. She remembered the woman's glowing eyes on the dance floor, the man's frozen reflection, the wide, unnatural smile. Her son was right. Something evil was hiding in plain sight, dressed in fine clothes, clapping and laughing like everyone else. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" she whispered. The boy's lips trembled. "I was scared. I thought maybe I was wrong. But when I saw them again tonight, I knew. I had to tell you." The mother squeezed his hand tightly. Her fear was mixed with a deep ache of love. He was only 7 years old, but he carried a secret no child should carry. He had seen the monsters when no one else did. And now, he had trusted her with the tiara. She looked around the hall again, her eyes sharper than before. Yes, she saw it now. The details were there, the two wide smiles, the fake eating, the eyes that glowed faintly under the lights. How had she not noticed earlier? How had no one noticed? Her chest grew tight. Her sister, the bride, stood surrounded by them. The guests cheered and clapped, but the mother no longer heard joy in their voices. She heard the hiss of something unnatural hiding behind human masks. The boy's voice broke her thoughts. "We have to leave before they see us. If they know we found out, they won't let us go." The mother's breath caught. She stared at him, shocked by the seriousness in his young face. This wasn't a child's game. This was survival. She forced a small smile, pretending to sip from her glass so no one would notice her shaking hands. "Okay," she whispered. "We'll leave soon. But stay close. Don't look at them. Don't speak to anyone." The boy nodded, clutching her hand tightly. The music played on, the laughter grew louder, but for the mother and her son, the truth had already broken the illusion. This was no wedding, this was a gathering of something else, and now they were trapped in the middle of it. The mother sat frozen in her chair, her son's small hand locked tightly in hers. Around them, the wedding continued as if nothing was wrong. Music boomed through the speakers, heels clicked against the floor, and glasses clinked with cheerful toasts. But none of it felt real anymore. To her, every laugh sounded hollow, every smile looked false. She knew the truth now. Her son had shown her. These were not guests. They were not human. And if they discovered that she knew, it would be over. She leaned close to her son and whispered, "We have to leave quietly. No sudden moves." The boy nodded, his eyes wide but brave. He had known this moment would come. The mother forced herself to smile, pretending to enjoy the wedding. She clapped politely when the music changed and even lifted her glass to her lips, though she did not drink. Inside, her heart pounded so loudly she feared others might hear it. Her eyes scanned the hall. The main door stood at the far end of the room. Only 20 steps, maybe less. But between her and freedom stood dozens of guests. Some danced, some laughed, some stared too long with eyes that glowed faintly in the light. She needed a plan that if she left suddenly, it would draw attention. If she ran, they would know. She had to move like everything was normal. She had to become an actress in this nightmare. She leaned to her son again. When I stand, stand with me. Hold my hand and don't let go. No matter what happens. The boy nodded again, his lips pressed tightly together. Slowly, she rose from her chair. She smiled at a nearby guest, pretending to stretch her legs. The guest smiled back, but the corners of his mouth stretched too far, wider than any human smile should. Her stomach turned, but she forced herself to look away. Come, she said softly to her son. They began walking toward the door. Each step felt like walking on thin ice. She tried to keep her pace natural, not too fast, not too slow. She nodded politely at anyone who looked her way. Inside, her body screamed to run. Halfway to the door, the boy tugged on her hand. Mom, he whispered, they're watching. She didn't dare look, but she felt it too, the weight of eyes pressing into her back. The air seemed colder, heavier. Her hands grew wet with sweat. Just keep walking, she whispered. The music swelled louder, but it no longer covered the silence in her mind. Every sound, every step, every breath felt sharp. The door was so close now, only a few more steps, but then, from the corner of her eye, she saw one of the guests stop dancing. He stood still, his glowing eyes fixed on her. His head tilted unnaturally, like a predator noticing prey. Her throat tightened. She didn't stop walking, but her legs nearly gave out. She squeezed her son's hand so hard he winced. Almost there, she whispered. Don't look back. Step by step, they reached the last few feet to the door. Her hand stretched toward the handle, her heart racing like thunder in her chest. If she could just open it, just one pull, freedom was theirs. But in that moment, a cold voice cut through the noise of the hall. Leaving so soon? The mother froze. Her blood turned to ice, and slowly, she turned her head, only to see one of the guests standing right behind her. The mother froze, her fingers only inches from the door handle. Her heart hammered in her chest as the cold voice echoed in her ears. Slowly, she turned, her son's hand still locked tightly in hers. Behind her stood a man in a black suit. At first glance, he looked like an ordinary guest. His smile was polite, his posture straight. But then his eyes glowed faintly under the golden light of the hall. The glow pulsed like a heartbeat, brightening and fading as if alive. The mother's throat went dry. She forced herself to stay calm, to wear a weak smile. I was just going to get some air, she whispered. The man tilted his head slightly, too far, almost unnaturally far. His smile stretched wider, revealing perfect white teeth that seemed sharper than before. The night is young, he said softly. Stay. Enjoy the wedding. The boy pressed closer to his mother's side. His small voice trembled. Mom, she squeezed his hand hard, trying to silence him. But the man's glowing eyes flicked down toward the child, studying him for a moment too long. Something about the look made the mother's skin crawl. The music behind them continued, the laughter and clapping never stopping, as if the rest of the hall was frozen in a loop of celebration. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. The world outside their small circle might as well not exist. The mother's instincts screamed. She could not stay here. She had to act. With a sudden burst of courage, she grabbed the door handle and pulled. For one brief second, she felt hope as the door moved, but then a strong hand slammed it shut again. The man's grip was cold as steel, his smile never fading. Leaving already? He said, voice low and sharp. Her son gasped, fear filling his eyes. But the mother refused to let panic win. She stood taller, her voice shaking but firm. Let us go, she demanded. The man only chuckled, a sound that made her stomach twist. His eyes glowed brighter now, and for a split second his skin rippled, revealing something beneath. Something not human. His face flickered like a mask, and behind it, something monstrous stared back at her. The mother pulled her son behind her, shielding him. Stay away from him, she whispered. The man leaned closer, his voice cold as ice. It's too late. You've seen us. The boy gripped his mother's arm, his voice rising with fear. Mom, we have to run! She looked into her son's terrified eyes, then back at the creature standing in front of her. Her body trembled, but deep inside, her will to protect her child grew stronger. With every ounce of courage she had left, she shoved the man's hand off the door and pulled it open again. Bright light from the hallway spilled into the dark hall. For a moment, it felt like freedom, but then every head in the wedding hall turned toward her, every smile vanished, every eye began to glow, the music stopped. The laughter ended. The entire hall fell into silence as dozens of inhuman eyes fixed on her and her son, the mother's breath caught in her throat. She held her son tighter than ever before. They were surrounded. The boy's voice cracked with terror as he whispered, "They know." And then, the screen faded to black.